Oh, okay, everybody, welcome to our Meet the Specialists for this morning. We are super excited to have Jimmy Larson here. He is our new, well, we'll get into what you are, but I'm just super excited to be able to do these interviews to let people know about the amazing specialists we have in Extension and how they can help you with whatever you're working on. So, Jimmy, I'm going to do my rapid fire questions and then we
Okay,
can get into things later. So,
sure.
um, I don't have this first, and I probably should have it listed, but tell us like your name and kind of what your specialty is at USU.
Yeah, so I'm Jimmy Larson. My technical title is Fruit Extension Specialist. So I handle most fruit crops, but most of my background has been in tree fruit, apples, cherries, and peaches, which also kind of coincides with what the main fruit are grown in the state. So yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. So, where did you like tell us about your background, your education? Like, where are you from?
Yeah,
Where?
originally from Michigan, and I did my undergrad at Michigan State in agronomy, actually. So I had like a field crops background, and then I did my master's in horticulture. I was working on sweet cherry training systems. So growing trees in more like plainer canopies that are easier to pick and harvest and everything. And then I went to North Carolina State for my PhD, and I worked on apples there. So yeah,
Okay. So, all the fruit trees that we have in Utah, you're
yeah,
like,
pretty much. Yeah.
all right. So, tell us. So you grew up in Michigan? Is that kind of
Yep.
where home is? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. I bet that's so different than coming out to Utah, right? Is that,
very much so. Yeah. Yeah.
are you liking it? Yeah.
Yeah, the mountains are beautiful. I can't, still not used to the heat. Um,
Yeah.
the sun is hard on me, but
Well, you've been here during like record heat. Like we
yeah.
don't, this has been kind of unnatural for us this year. So we had like record snow and now record heat. And
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the winter though, because I like to
Oh, I
ski.
bet.
So I'm excited for that.
Awesome. Okay. Do you have any pets?
No, not at the moment. I've had cats in the past, but I'm looking to get another one soon.
Okay.
So now
So
that
cat
I'm
person.
starting it,
Awesome.
so yeah.
All right. What is your favorite flavor of Aggie ice cream?
I haven't actually had Aggie ice cream yet, but
What?
I like a mint chocolate chip. So if they have that, that would be my favorite.
Okay. Well, we'll get on that. We'll send some to you.
Okay.
So what would be your desert island book or movies?
Ooh, that's a good question. I've really been liking this show called White Lotus. So probably that.
Okay.
'Cause it's a little funny. It's also got some intrigue and mystery. So yeah.
I love it. Okay. And then are you reading anything right now?
Um, no, not at the moment.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, what's one fact about you that people might not know?
I'm actually from Florida. I was born in Florida. And so that's very different from the other places that I lived.
Yeah, you're
Uh,
like all over the place.
yeah, but that was always in like elementary school. That was always my fun fact.
Yeah.
People would be surprised at that. So,
Well, that's awesome. So, what's your favorite way to spend your free time when you're not working with fruit trees?
probably getting outside and hiking. And then lately I've been doing a lot of cooking. So between those two things,
Okay.
yeah,
Oh, I love that. I want to get back into cooking, but it gets crazy.
yeah.
So, how long have you been here with USU?
Uh, just a little bit over 3 months. I started on May 1st.
Okay,
So,
cool.
yeah, which is kind of the thick of it for us, because a lot of our work begins in the spring.
Sure.
So I was here right as trees started to bloom. And then yeah.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about how you got started in this area of expertise. Like, did you always know you wanted to be in this field?
No, I didn't really even know it was a thing until I was in college. Um, so I decided when I first went to college, I was a math major, and then I had a roommate that studied horticulture. But I thought there would be more jobs in like field crops, so that's why I did agronomy. But then the summer before my senior year, I did an internship at a fertilizer company that had an apple orchard, and we worked in there, and I thought that was really cool. And we were just like training trees and just to see the way that they grew. And I really liked that, like it was permanent, like what you do one year will affect the next year. It's not like field crops where things are replanted and you kind of get to start over. You kind of have to keep working with what you got. So I really like that, and I just emailed a bunch of people around the country that study tree fruit, and got really lucky that somebody there at Michigan State wanted to take me on for master's. And then I've kind of done that ever since. So I did my master's there, and then I worked as a technician. Then I did my PhD. So yeah.
Okay. And it's all been tree fruits, cherries, apples, peaches.
Yeah. Michigan was, we did what we call stone fruit. So that's all your peaches and cherries. And we did a little bit of apricots and pluots, which is a
Yeah.
cross between plums and apricots. But yeah,
I think I saw those at Costco,
yeah, they're
actually.
good.
They're good. My dad has an Asian pear tree that he babies. It is like his pride and joy. So
Okay. Yeah, pears is actually the one thing that I haven't worked with. But yeah.
okay. So what kind of about that you talked a little bit about like some things that excite you about it, but kind of go into why this subject, like what about this excites you?
Yeah, I think it's just all the manipulations that go into it and all the things that you can do. So really what we're doing is like trees are were basically evolved to grow in the forest. And so they're inherently large and should try to compete with other trees, but that's really hard, and kind of against what would be efficient for a grower where you're planting all trees in rows. And so there's a whole bunch of work that's been done to try to shrink down trees. And so there's rootstocks that we grow them on that are dwarfing, and then we can use plant growth regulators to change the way trees grow. And so all those different inputs really excite me, because once again, it's kind of not like field crops where you can change the genetics more easily. We have to kind of rely on more cultural practices to do that.
Mhm. So your entire research has been based around kind of this idea of like chemical thinners, right? Is that my understanding in your
Pretty much
background?
for my PhD, yeah, I was studying, how fruit fall off the tree. So I kind of looked at there's really two periods of time during the growing season where they do. You have the thinning period in the spring, and then right before harvest, fruit can fall off the tree. And that's what we call pre-harvest drop. So I kind of look at those two times. But yeah, my main work was in the springtime, trying to predict chemical thinner
Okay.
effects.
So can you tell me as simple as possible, because I am a layperson here, like what that process looks like? What were you looking at, I guess?
Yeah, so the whole premise is that fruit trees produce too many flowers. And then if you were to let all those flowers go to fruit and then continue for the rest of the growing season, you'd end up with a lot of really small fruit, that are low quality and people don't really want to eat. And then also, if you have too many fruit, you can inhibit floral production for the next year. That's mostly true, and that's pretty much mostly exclusive to apple. It's not as true in cherry and peach and stuff like that. But so growers will tend to thin their fruit, and so that they have a crop load that results in adequate fruit size and also return bloom for the next growing season. Um, but the way to do that most efficiently is to apply PGRs. And what those do is they stress the tree, and in response to that stress, the tree will drop fruit, because it just can't support that number of fruit. And so you're really magnifying that evolutionary mechanism by applying these PGRs. But it's really erratic, and related to weather. And so what we were trying to do is give growers a tool that they can use to know how many fruit are going to fall off the tree, because that's to make multiple applications. Um, but it's a really condensed period of about 3 weeks that they can make those applications. But you don't really know how many fruit are going to fall off until like 2 weeks after. So, if you can speed up that time of prediction, then you can give growers more flexibility in making applications, so that they don't risk over or under thinning.
Okay. So this is kind of an alternative to, like a hand thinning process where you just kind of guess. This is a little bit more science based.
Yeah. The goal is really to get all your thinning done before hand thinning, so that because that's really labor intensive and costly. So there's really the basis of it was that people found that, um, fruit size is related to whether or not a fruit is going to fall off. So a fruit will stop growing before it falls off the tree. And so we were use that and then use the spectrometer to see if there were differences, between fruit that ended up falling off and staying on. So it was kind of all related to size is what affected that spectrometer data that we got. So we
What
could
did the spectrometer measure?
So it measures the amount of light that's being reflected off of whatever you're measuring. So it measures visible from about 300 nanometers to near infrared light. And so it'll shoot a beam of light at the fruit, and then that fruit's going to absorb some of that light, but also reflect some of it. And so it measures how much light is reflected back to it. And so there's one real important area that's related to how much chlorophyll was in it. And we saw that fruit that ended up staying on the tree had lower reflectance, so it was absorbing more of that light that chlorophyll absorbs. And so that was really related to the size of the fruit.
That is so cool. So essentially, if it had naturally more chlorophyll, it was more likely to stay on the tree.
Yeah, and that was kind of a proxy for like its size because
Sure.
larger fruit had just more total chlorophyll in them. So yeah.
So cool. So what are your favorite apple or cherry varieties to grow and why?
So tart cherry, at least here in Utah and in Michigan as well, there's really only one cultivar, and that's called Montmorency. Um, I do like, I believe it's a sweet and tart hybrid called Balaton. That's pretty good. For apples, I really like a tart one. So there's one called Zestar that I really enjoy. It's an early apple, but it's not very commonly grown. So,
Okay. I have this weird, I don't know if you want to call it obsession. I love the envy apples that are in like Walmart. Like
mm.
they are definitely on the higher end of price, but that is my favorite apple. Like I don't know if I could even grow it here. Is that something you could grow in Utah?
I believe envy. So recently there's kind of been an influx of what they call club cultivars,
Okay. Okay.
and so you have to like belong to a club to be able to grow it. And some of them are only there's one called Cosmic Crisp, which is only available to Washington growers
Okay.
because it was bred at Washington State. And so I don't know if envy is in one of that, but I believe it's a club variety. And so I know they like highly regulate how much it's grown.
Interesting.
So
We'll have to sign up to be because I don't have an orchard. So if
yeah.
I was starting out though, like I want to get a couple fruit trees, like what would you recommend to somebody just getting into growing fruit trees, like on a very small local, like my backyard kind of level?
Yeah, I would say probably get a few for sure, and do different cultivars because it does help if they're cross-pollinated. So if you were to plant 5 Honeycrisp, you wouldn't get as good a fruit set as if you were to plant a few different, like maybe a Gala with your Honeycrisp. And so that would be one thing. And yeah, it's good to have just some like backup in case some die. But yeah, they'll
No,
grow.
yeah.
It's really cool. The one thing I would really like here is that so many people do have fruit trees in their yards, and just kind of walking through towns, you see that, and so that's really neat.
We growing up, my parents had an orchard. They were trying to start an orchard, and I was probably 14, and I ran over one of their saplings. Like they just got it bare root with our lawnmower.
Uh-huh.
Had a rebar, and I like wrapped the rebar around. So my parents, I wasn't allowed to mow the lawn after that.
No.
Because I would kill their fruit trees. But now we have they have the Asian pear and they have a couple other ones that are really good. So
Nice.
what do you think that most people get wrong about growing apples?
Um, I think, yeah, just kind of all those inputs. I don't know that they get it wrong. It's just they don't know about them. Um, And so, yeah, I think just kind of education, and then really the crop load is so important. I don't think sounds kind of counterintuitive to take off fruit from the tree, but it really affects so many things. If you have, even if you have too few of fruit, you'll have too really large fruit, and those don't store very well. So yeah, it's a real balance, but it's tough because you don't know until the next year, and you have to wait whole years in
Sure.
between harvests. So there's a lot to learn. But yeah, I guess maybe just patience is the thing that's most important.
So talk to me about the difference between like pruning a tree versus like thinning the fruit.
Yeah, so pruning is mostly to just kind of set the architecture of the tree. And so what we really want to focus on there is how much light is coming into the canopy because you want to maximize that. And so that's kind of comes into taking out really big limbs. Your kind of recommendation is to take out 1 to 2 big limbs in the tree every year. and that kind of balances the light ratios. And you want to be fruiting on younger wood. So that is kind of also a way to thin down the fruit because you are taking off potential fruit when you're pruning. But it's more to set the architecture and allow enough light to come into the tree. And then once you have that architecture set, then you're kind of with your thinning, you're optimizing how many fruit are on the tree. So they actually make these little discs that go on a branch, and it'll tell you how many fruit you should have on that branch, just based on because there's been a ton of work done that's looked at how much fruit a tree can support based on its size. So yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So the average home grower, um, when do they usually prune their trees? Like when should we be doing it?
You should do it in the winter, and you should do it when, as long as you don't have a real cold snap coming on. If you were to prune right before it got really cold, you could run the risk of having some winter dieback. But yeah, definitely do it in the winter. Even if you're in like kind of late February, that should be fine. So
Okay, cool.
yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about what you plan on doing here at USU Extension.
Yeah, a lot of kind of the same things that I've done in the past. This year, I've done quite a bit of thinning work. And so it was a real shift for me coming from North Carolina to Utah because the climate's so different. And what really influences chemical thinners is the weather. And so if you were to get a bunch of cloudy, warm days, then trees are going to be really easy to thin because they're already kind of stressed, but which is pretty indicative of North Carolina weather. But Utah, as you know, it's much different. There's a lot more sun, and especially in the springtime, it's kind of that cooler temperature. So trees are really pumping out carbohydrates and are at a much healthier status, I guess, but less stressed. And so it's a lot harder to thin those trees. And so I've been doing a project that's looked at try to first stress a tree by reducing its photosynthesis by applying a PGR and then applying another thinner to really get that thinning response and kind of stimulate that stress. And then in the fall, right now I'm working on a project with this another PGR that's used to lengthen the harvest window and seeing how we can better stretch out harvest for growers. So a lot of work around crop load management, which I've done in the past. We're just now starting to get chemical thinners for peaches, which is exciting. Um, so just learning how those work. And it seems like there's a lot of variability between peach cultivars, which is true for apples too. But even nobody's really done that work yet to know what those differences are. So to learn those and just trying to give growers more tools that they can use to better manage their crop.
Well, that's awesome. So where are you doing all this research at? Like, is it at a farm?
Kind of between most of my work with the university is at Kaysville Research Station, and then I've done quite a bit of working growers orchards, and so all the real large commercial growers are down in Utah County, so I go down there quite a bit.
Sure.
And so my harvest study this year is at a grower site right in Santa Quinn. So yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So what can you do to help people? Like we have county offices, right? And extension. What can you do to help people out in our county offices with maybe their clients or their growers?
Yeah, I think kind of developing some fact sheets that um, county agents can use and refer to. So I could develop something like based on chemical thinning or pruning trees, but also holding in-person workshops. I think it'd be a good way for me to communicate to those agents, and then they can kind of, if they get homeowner questions, they can answer them that way.
Okay. I know, so I run the social media accounts for Extension, and I know a majority of my questions in the spring that I get are pruning. When do I prune?
Okay.
How do I prune? How much do I prune? Can I prune this now? And Utah's so different because we've got so many different zones, right? Like Rich County is such a different zone than Washington County. So I'm I'm very interested to see and get some more information that I can send on because I'm not an expert. I
Yeah.
just post what the experts are doing. Okay, so what is one last thing that you wish people understood about I'm going to go with pruning because that really is our major questions that we
Yeah. I think pruning, I think people get a little scared of it. Like the tree will grow back. You could kind of like hack a tree and it'll grow back. My master's project was actually like, so I said we typically would do 1 to 2 big cuts in the tree per year. Um, when we did that on sweet cherries, when we just started growing them on dwarfing rootstocks, we saw that we would sometimes get inadequate regrowth from those sites. And so if you were to continue making those big cuts each year, but you don't get enough regrowth, then you're going to lose your productivity. So what we did was what we termed whole tree renewal. So that was cutting off all the main limbs and taking the tree back to its like just kind of central axis. And it totally grew back and you got back into fruit production 3 years after. So yeah, don't be scared to just make some cuts and then see where things regrow. And you just want to make sure that you're taking out any really vigorous growth and anything growing really upward or anything growing really downward, and you'll be pretty good. So
So you're meaning like when you're looking at your branches, like if I have a branch that's like seriously just straight up, that's something that you would cut versus
yeah,
something.
yeah, and you kind of so like if you got your trunk here and it's coming out here, you just like take it all the way out and leave a little stub. And if you leave a stub, you should usually get a regrowth
Yeah.
from it.
I do think
So,
people are terrified to prune. Uh,
yeah,
I have a friend in Utah County or Salt Lake County. Anyway, and she was so funny. She posted on Instagram, like, look, my little tree has fruit. I was like, your tree is only 2 years old. Like you probably can't, right? They
yeah,
shouldn't
you
have,
should take your
like,
fruit off
you
of
should
it.
take
Yeah,
the fruit off. And she was
yeah,
like, really? And I was like, I'm sorry.
yeah.
Bear here, but how long does it usually take for trees to get fruit that you can keep?
A grower will, but they want their trees usually smaller. A grower would probably start fruiting trees in year 3. I would guess a homeowner should probably do it year 4, maybe year 5.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to pruning. Yeah, like if you watch a grower prune, they'll just hack at trees. And if you're there, I was one time at a pruning demonstration, and the guy was talking through it, and he was just like cutting as he was talking. It was amazing to see. But yeah, they'll grow back, and so you don't have to be scared of them.
They'll grow back. It's a
Yeah,
truth. Like you really, unless you run over it with a lawnmower, like it's gonna be
yeah,
okay.
yeah. A young tree like that. Yeah,
Oh yeah, no, it was bad. It was real bad, but
yeah.
awesome. Well, is there anything else that you want to tell people about yourself while we have you?
No, I think that's it. Just excited to be here and work
Hey,
with people around the state. So yeah,
it's gonna be so good. USU Extension is awesome. So, okay, well, thank you so much. And thank you everybody who attended. This will be recorded so you can share it with people. We'll have it posted online so people can watch it later if they want to. But thank you so much for being here.
thank you.
Yeah, we'll see you later.
Thanks. Have a great day.